Just what is an SUV anymore, right? Well, like a lot of things these days, the definition is becoming a little bit more fluid. And you know what? That's just fine. If you want to buy a hatchback that's been raised off the ground with boxy sides and a bit of cladding, you do that because it's adding utility, SUV. And if you want to buy a sedan with a curvy roof and a bit of ground clearance and a zesty engine, go for it because it's adding sport, SUV. But what if you're a little bit more old school? What if for you an SUV is something with 4x4, a foot of ground clearance that can ford streams and climb mountains and whose ancestors have fought in wars? Well, my friend, I've got 3 SUVs just for you. Here they are, the absolute titans of off-roading 4x4 royalty, the Defender, the Wrangler and the G-Wagon. We've been meaning to get these 3 together for ages and finally it's come to fruition. And what better place than an off-road park to put them through their paces. Now, before we go any further, let me just clarify, this is not a direct apples to apples comparison. I mean, how could it be? This one costs about 70 lakh rupees, that one's just over 1 crore, and that one is 2.5 crores last time I checked. So yeah, they're not even close to being in the same segment, but they all excel at their area of being champions off-road. But I also want to see what they are like to live with and to drive out on the road, so we'll do a bit of real-world testing there as well. But in the meantime, tell us down in the comments which of these 3 is your favorite. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and I hope you're subscribed to the Autocar India channel. And well, since we're here at our favorite off-road playground, Learn Off-Road Academy in Pali, Maharashtra, we thought why not start with the good stuff, what they're like off-road. Now you know the Wrangler Rubicon means business because of the way you have to engage all the 4-wheel drive stuff. It's all levers and hard switches, no touchscreens involved in this process. In fact, putting it into 4-wheel drive is just the first step. You got to go into 4-wheel drive low, you can lock the differentials, you go into off-road plus, which is a few electronic aids I believe, and finally you can disconnect the sway bars. Now that is proper, serious off-roading stuff. And remember, because this is the Rubicon, it's got mud terrain tires as standard, so it already grips like hell just out of the factory. Now that we've got a straight path ahead, I'm going to put the front and rear diff locks on and just let good old-fashioned engineering look after it for me. The thing about the Wrangler is it's just so mechanically sorted that if you wanted to do something, you just tell it and it will do it. Off-road visibility, I will say, in this is better than in the Defender because you get a better view, a little bit more off the sides, so you can see where you want to go when you want to get there. Just a cakewalk for this thing. I don't think people who aren't in the know give mud terrain tires enough credit. If you're a casual off-roader and wondering why your car is so uncomfortable on mud terrain tires, take it off-roading. You will know exactly what you paid for. Purely as an off-road tool then, it is near unstoppable. I particularly love the disconnecting sway bars that turn it from a rhino to a rock crab and give it unreal articulation. So could the Land Rover Defender be more of the same? Quite the opposite actually. Now when it comes to light off-roading tasks like maybe getting across a slightly muddy track, things like that, I trust all-wheel drive and electronic systems blindly. But because of the serious off-roading that's expected of a Defender, some of which we're attempting today, I'm a little wary. But I shouldn't be, because along with its Range Rover derived monocoque chassis and luxurious air suspension, it has center and rear diff locks and a low range transfer case. But everything else is software. But I'm reassured by the fact that this is a Land Rover and they would not mess around with something like the Defender. But yeah, you don't get the same all-encompassing sense of invincibility that you would with the other two. I think for this rock crawl, I'm going to engage rock crawl mode because this car has one. And if I'm not going to trust the electronics, what am I doing here, right? So here we go. Just so easy, so smooth. Ultimately, the Land Rover is not quite as capable as the tough and tumble Jeep, and all those electronic aids can sometimes cut power when you need it most and also leave you feeling a little disconnected. So where does that leave the arguably even more luxurious Mercedes? Now, though the Wrangler Rubicon and the Defender are both very, very capable off-road, there's something utterly titanic about the G-Wagon. It just feels invincible. I don't know if it's this towering driving position or just the joy that you can derive from activating these three locking differentials this way from those three iconic buttons on the dashboard. You're sat really high and that can be a little disconcerting at first. You feel like the center of gravity is too high and you're just going to fall over. But you have to learn to trust the Jeep. This feels an interesting mix of the Wrangler and the Defender, that it's quite mechanical. I'm relying heavily on the diffs and the engine to do all the work as you would in the Wrangler. But it's just a little bit more sophisticated and cushioned, if you know what I mean, much like it is in the Defender. Does that make this the ultimate off-roader? Well, I'm not so sure. But the sensation is certainly very rewarding. Now, the tricky part, it's quite slippery. The rain has wreaked havoc with this area. This car is quite heavy. Just gonna gun it up this slope and hope we don't get stuck. It took the roughest route possible, but it just powered its way out. Jesus. So there you go, three very different approaches to off-roading, but each incredibly effective in its own right. On outright ability, it's clearly the Wrangler Rubicon that's the superior off-roading tool, while the G-Wagon is especially impressive considering it's running on highway tires. The Defender can slip up when things get punishingly rough, but we feel better tires and one of the more powerful engines would sort this out. With that, it's time to hit the road, but before we can, let's talk back seats. And here's where the Defender claws it back. Being the most spacious and comfortable of the bunch, the roof-mounted safari windows are a nice retro callback. And remember, you can have it in 5, 6, 7 or 8 seat layouts depending on the body style and options you choose. The Mercedes comes in second, being very luxurious in look and feel, but not quite up there on comfort. But you do get a great view out the windows. The tough Jeep meanwhile has a low set bench with hard cushions and little support, reflecting its positioning as an off-road toy first and foremost. They all have large boots that can easily swallow up a couple of drinks coolers and weekend bags, with the Defender 110 getting an optional pair of small third-row jump seats that fold away. Anyway, enough mucking about, let's head for some smooth, soothing tarmac where the Wrangler feels a little out of its element. Now, it's already quite a big commitment if you bought a Jeep Wrangler. It says you want to go off-road and that is your primary objective. But it's even more of a commitment if you've chosen the Rubicon variant, because that's even more hardcore. And while you can turn a blind eye to a lot of things while you're off-roading and absolutely dominating some obstacles in the mud, once you get on the road, the part where you actually have to get from your home to the off-road course, that's when you might have to swallow your pride and admit that this is not going to be the most comfy experience. For one, in the monsoons, this isn't exactly waterproof. When it's raining really heavily, you might get dripped on through the gaps in the doors. Then there's the fact that there's almost no space in the driver footwell for both your feet, let alone a dead pedal. How do large Americans fit in this car? I can barely move my left foot without tapping the brake, and that's really not ideal. Then, and I'm not sure if you can hear this, there are loads of rattles throughout the cabin. There's something in the boot that seems to be clanging around. I can hear a lot of wind noise through some of the panels and the very, very upright windscreen. And then, of course, there's the road noise, which I'll get to in a moment. But the biggest compromise you'll make is to ride quality, and that's because this car has off-road suspension. What's more, because this is the Rubicon variant, you also get mud terrain tires as standard. Now, while these are great for scrabbling up a slippery slope, out here on the road, they really do make their presence felt in the cabin. You hear a lot of road noise and tire roar from underneath the car, especially out on the highway when you're going pretty fast. And yeah, combined with the tough suspension, they don't do wonders for ride quality, even on a smooth piece of tarmac like this one. I'm constantly getting bumped and fidgeted around, and you simply cannot judge the suspension by the standards of other 60 to 70 lakh rupee SUVs. But all that being said, I am really impressed with how much they've done to try and make things more comfortable inside here. The Wrangler facelift has brought with it a larger touchscreen and additional features like ADAS, and it has a punchy sound system too. But then it's hardly like the other two are under-equipped, with each getting its own share of entertainment, convenience and safety tech. Oh, and though our G-Wagon runs the older infotainment system, the facelifted model gets Merc's new MBUX software and a touchscreen. And though none of them have been tested by any Indian crash test authority, the Mercedes and Land Rover scored 5 stars in Euro NCAP tests, while the Jeep scored just 1 star. What's also quite impressive is that they've even managed to squeeze out a decent amount of storage in this cabin despite it being pretty bare bones. I mean, okay, the door pockets are just a bunch of straps because these are removable doors, but other than that, you get a huge cubby hole down here. Because this is an American car, you get pretty large cup holders, and there's even a decent sized glove box. Then there's the quality of the interior. It might not be a full-on luxury brand like the other two, but Jeep is quite high up there. It has cars like the Grand Cherokee, remember, which are meant to compete with the GLE and the like. So yeah, the quality of the inside is actually very good. The leather feels nice and soft to touch. It's cross-stitched. The contrast colors and the materials in general are very good. It manages to feel both luxurious and hard-wearing at the same time. And while on the topic of trying to feel like a luxury car, I do have to go back to the driving experience, because the engine is a very good 2-liter turbocharged petrol. It doesn't feel utilitarian. You don't miss the earlier V6 from the previous Wrangler. It feels strong enough even out on the highway. Yes, there is a bit of lag from the gearbox, but we'll forgive it that, because otherwise this is a very refined and powerful enough engine. What also comes as a huge surprise, especially given this car's rough and tumble chassis and suspension, is how friendly the steering is. It's very light. It doesn't offer too much kickback when you go over a sharp bump. And it's even got a great turning circle for a car of this nature. It's pretty impressive. So you get the sense that Jeep has really made its best effort to try and make this livable, because at the end of the day, these are used as lifestyle vehicles more than they are hardcore off-roaders, despite their actual capability. And Jeep knows that it needs to retain customers' everyday usability. So kudos for them for really putting in a lot of effort. And remember, this car is assembled in India. But let's face it, in this company, it does feel the most utilitarian of the lot. At the very opposite end of the spectrum is the cushy Land Rover Defender. Many purists scoffed when they said that this new reborn Land Rover Defender would not be based on a tough ladder frame chassis and instead a monocoque chassis, one shared with the likes of the Range Rover and the Discovery. It was the one thing that set the Defender apart in the past, and now it would be homogenized with the rest of the range. Woe is everybody. But the simple fact is, it's still an amazing off-roader, and as a result of choosing that monocoque chassis, it's a far better luxury car in the process. Of the three cars here, yes, it does feel the furthest removed from its utilitarian and militarized history, and therefore perhaps the least authentic of these iconic off-roading SUVs. And that was a big risk Land Rover took when it launched this new Defender, but I think frankly it's paid off. It's no wonder the Defender is the best-selling Land Rover in India by a long shot. There are loads and loads of benefits of using this toughened-up luxury D7X platform, but the first one you notice is just how practical and useful this cabin is. There is storage everywhere. You've got a massive central console and every single inch of it is some form of storage. Cup holders, wireless charger, huge bin under there, further storage down there, massive door pockets, all rubber lined, and even a little tray besides the glove box over there. It's also still incredibly luxurious. I will say it falls a little shy of the brand's own Range Rover products, but I guess they had to have some hierarchy there. But you still get fantastically well put together materials, leather, stitching, good quality plastics. And I like that this is one of the last few Land Rover products to retain some physical controls all splayed out here within easy reach. Yes, a lot of it has already started migrating into the touchscreen, but you still get plenty here, which means you can use it while you're off-roading without having to fiddle with the touch panel. I also have to say that while all these three are big cars, I did fear the most about getting used to driving this Defender. You see, the Wrangler and the G-Wagon both have their iconic bonnets with sort of markers on the edges to tell you where they are. That's supposed to help you with off-roading, but this has taken a more conventional square cut approach. It's just a big luxury SUV from behind the wheel. But nope, I've been able to get accustomed to it quite fast, and it really does shrink around you. And speaking of shrinking around you, this is the only monocoque SUV in the bunch, and as such it has far superior on-road driving dynamics. This one's even equipped with air suspension, which you can lift and lower as you please. But more than any of that, it's the fact that the ride is so much better controlled than either of the other two. Not that you'd want to go corner carving in any of these off-roaders, and when you have to get across long distances, this one will serve you best. The Defender is also the one that gives you the maximum choice, because first there are three body styles to choose from: the 90, the 110, which is this one, and the 130. That also gives you various seating configurations to choose from, and then there are the engines. There's everything from this 2-litre petrol to a 3-litre straight-six diesel, all the way to a full-on V8. I've currently got the smallest engine, the 2-litre petrol, but it's called the P300 because it packs a whopping 300 horsepower. And frankly, it belies its small engine capacity with the amount of power it delivers, because you never feel wanting. So far then, the Wrangler has been great off-road and not so great on it, while the Defender has been the opposite. Does the G-Wagon once again trundle over the middle ground? The G-Wagon is by far and away the most expensive car in this test. At the time of filming, it's not on the Mercedes website for purchase. That's probably because they're transitioning to the new facelifted version that's due out very soon. But when this car was launched, the G400D, it cost 2.5 crore rupees. Previously, they had the G350D, the same engine, just with a bit less power. And that sold for around 1.5 crore when it was launched. Not that much has changed, surely, for the price to go up so much, right? But look, it's so high in demand, despite the price, people just want to get a hold of one, and it's constantly sold out every time people try to. And that's really the power of the G-Wagon. It's such an iconic thing. It successfully made the transition from utility vehicle to all-out luxury powerhouse. To put that into context, while there are still people the world over who would buy a Wrangler to use off-road, in fact many people do because it's just so purpose-built, this is a status symbol through and through. Yes, you can take it off-roading, as I'm sure you've seen, but you'd much rather be turning up as a nice high society dinner in it than anything else. To help put paid to that high price tag and positioning, this is definitely the most lavishly laid out interior of them all. Although that G manufacturer sign on the grab handle over there tells me that some of it might just be optional. But that said, it's not as big a departure from its utilitarian forebears as the Land Rover Defender is. It's still that very tough body on frame SUV. Still got a bolt upright windshield and a bolt upright seating position. I mean, even though they've lavished it with every possible luxury, it still reminds you every minute that this is a G-Wagon. And it all starts with those 3 big switches over there, which are for the 3 diff locks. Nothing more iconic than that. Or perhaps there is, and that is the lock, unlock, clack, which does really sound like a machine gun being cocked. Being a body-on-frame SUV, it's still got that utilitarian edge. It's still tough. It still hammers over bumps rather than absorb them. Though it has to be said, not quite as rough around the edges as the Jeep Wrangler. It is a Mercedes after all. So they've rounded things off, but even on this concrete surface, you might be able to tell that I am being moved around. Now some might make excuses for it and put it down to that G-Wagon charm, but in absolute terms, in this comparison, it's simply not as comfy as the air-sprung Land Rover Defender. They haven't skimped on the engines though. I mean, this is the entry-level model technically, and it's a 400D. That means 330 horsepower and 700 Newton meters from a 3-liter straight-six diesel. And boy is it strong. Allied to a smooth yet snappy 9-speed automatic gearbox, it'll just haul you to the horizon. But in case it's not enough, you can have a G63, which is of course a 4-liter V8. Refinement is also surprisingly good. Yes, because of this boxy shape, you do get some wind buffeting and a little bit of echo inside the cabin. But there's surprisingly little noise from the engine, and not a whole lot from the tires as well. I'm sure a lot of buyers are swayed simply by the way these SUVs look, and frankly all 3 look like serious business coming down the road. To a layperson, the G-Wagon may as well be the same SUV that debuted in the late 1970s, even though this is an all-new generation that debuted in 2018. They stayed true to the look with the tall stance, square shape, external door hinges, round headlamps, big star on the grille, and of course the indicators on top of the fenders. The Adventure Edition adds a bit of visual drama with mud flaps, a roof rack and a ladder, but even without this, the G has a uniquely towering presence. The other 2 aren't far behind, mind you, the Defender especially, with its 3 different body styles and various exterior specifications. It likes to let everyone know that you've arrived. Yes, it looks very little like the original, but instead uses modern renditions of the original's signature motifs: round headlamps, small tail lamps, contrast colors and a flat window line, to name a few. We've all heard the Wrangler Thar comparisons by now, but let's look at it on its own. Frankly, the way Jeep has updated its iconic model for the modern era is spot on. With the square, flared wheel arches, exposed bonnet latches, big Rubicon lettering on the hood, and of course that iconic 7-slot grille. This is a facelift, but the visual changes are too minor to really notice. But my favorite part of the look remains its chunky mud-terrain tires that really look the business. Now on to the final task at hand. They're not rivals, so we don't have to pick a winner, right? Well, yes and no. After all, they are united by their incredible abilities off-road, and each has a presence and desirability that would make anyone proud to park them in their driveway. But since each has carved out a rut for itself, let's see who's best at what. The Jeep makes few compromises to comfort in its quest to be the ultimate off-roader, and though there is a more user-friendly unlimited version, if you are getting a Wrangler, it's really the tough-as-nails Rubicon that you want. Thanks to local assembly, it comes at a relatively reasonable price, and for that you get the greatest stock 4x4 in the world. How about that? The Gentleman's Express, that is the Defender, is determined to make off-roading as comfy and effortless as possible, and to that end it feels as if it was designed to save you from a sticky situation rather than taking you to voluntarily get stuck. Moreover, it's the comfiest, most spacious and best for the road, which, let's face it, is where any of these cars will spend most of their time. If you like to talk strictly in superlatives, the G-Wagon is the one for you. It certainly has all the big numbers. It does off-road well, on-road well enough, and it absolutely kills it in the desirability stakes. It hasn't forgotten its tough roots, yet it feels sufficiently plush on the inside, but we have to call out its inflated price, which only a few years ago was a full 1 crore rupees less. But hey, if people are willing to spend, why not, right? If we had to pick just one, it's the Defender that gets our vote. It does everything extremely well and nothing too badly, and best of all, it gives you so many options to make it your own. And all this at a relatively reasonable price that's bang at the heart of the big luxury SUV market. And you can see why it's JLR's best-selling product in India by far. Whichever you ultimately choose though, you can't really go wrong. These are more than just SUVs, they're shining beacons that pave the way for lesser 4x4s to follow. They fly the flag high for adventure and the great outdoors, and by gosh we hope they find a way to survive in a future of electrification and tight regulations. After all, we could all use a bit of sport and utility in our lives. Thank you so much for watching.